What's up, guys? Hope you're having a good day. You've seen the title and you've seen the thumbnail. Last weekend's event, UFC Fight Night Dern versus Rebus, was absolutely huge for us. It was our biggest winning night in a long time. We actually went 8-0 on bets. We went 6-0 on live bets, 2-0 on pre-fight bets. If you watched last week's breakdown video, you can see here where the thumbnail and the title says the rematch for the fight between Dern and Rebus last weekend will be different. Obviously, in that breakdown, I was talking about strongly considering a bet on Mackenzie Dern, and I ended up pulling the trigger on her at very nice underdog odds. In the video, when I recorded that breakdown, I hadn't made my mind up on it yet. I usually want to see the weigh-ins just to see how both girls kind of, look at the stare downs and to make sure I'm not betting on a fighter that looks ill or misses weight or anything like that. But Mackenzie looked great at the weigh-ins. I pulled the trigger on her as an underdog. She came through for us in a big way. For similar reasons, to be honest, that we were talking about betting her in the breakdown last week. And I also had a bet on Bruno Lopez to beat Magomed Gadzhizulov as a big underdog. He also came through for us very big. And we've been on one hell of a run with these pre-fight bets. We did lose a bet on Ramon Tavares just before Christmas. But prior to that, we hit a winner here on the fight between Du Hochoi, Nate Landwehr, not to go to a decision. We hit a winner here on Carlos Hernandez. One of my biggest bets of 2024 was Jake Paul to beat Mike Tyson. He came through for us. We did lose this bet, but then we also hit winners on Jasmine Jasudavicius and Sergey Siddy to beat Garrett Armfield. And we also had a winner on Elise Reed to beat Jessica Penne. So we've been doing very well on pre-fight betting since October. We always do very well on live betting the UFC, which is a huge cash cow for us. We made almost 7 units of profit last weekend in UFC live betting. We went 6-0 on live bets, and I'm confident we're going to have another big winning event this week. I highly recommend, while there are spare spaces available in my live betting group, to just give it a try, give it a chance, because what always happens is not many people watch these videos, so when spaces become available, it takes a while to fill them up. But when all my spaces in my live betting group are full, it takes months sometimes before you can get in. So what always happens is there's spaces available for a while, and then as soon as they fill up, I get emails, messages from people wanting to join all the time, and they can't because the group is fucking full. And why do I have a cap on the number of people in the group? Well, obviously because the more people that place the same live bets at the same time, the faster the odds decline and become suspended. So for that reason, I set a limit on the number of people in the group. We make a profit on approximately 70% of UFC events. 2025 is going to be a huge year for us. We already banked almost 7 units of profit last weekend. Do not sleep on this. I'm telling you, do not sleep on this. You will absolutely love it. And if you watch every UFC event live, it's a no-brainer because essentially you're getting paid to watch the UFC. So give it a try. Links in the description below. What else do we need to talk about? Last month was a huge profitable month for me as well. Not on football or on the UFC, but on the darts. That's right. Every December and January we get the World Championship of Darts. And since there was no UFC, I thought, you know what? I'll try my hand betting a new sport. Ended up having one of the biggest winning days of my entire career in terms of monetary value, where I hit a 10.0 underdog bet on one of the games. And so December was huge for me. For that reason, in 2025, I'm going to try and become profitable betting on darts. In the last 4 weeks, I'm up 12 units. And so if you're a member of my community, I put an announcement out earlier on that if you're in my UFC live betting group or football live betting group, we will now be betting on the darts. And so get involved and join the darts betting group. We can see all the boys having a lot of fun here today. There's a tournament going on at the moment, the Bahrain Masters, that we've been live betting. So get involved on that. And we did make a profit today. We've got more bets tomorrow. And if you scroll up and you're a member of my community, you can find the Telegram link to darts betting there, which is all very, very nice. So get involved, guys. Literally, what are you doing? Get involved. I make a profit on every single thing that I do. I have for a very, very long time. 2025 is going to be an absolutely huge year. 2024 was actually my worst performing year of my career. And I've been doing this for 15 years. Whenever I have a bad patch or a slow period, we always bounce back and have an amazingly huge winning run. So I'm confident 2025 is going to be great. On top of that, very, very important to know that I'm very different. I'm a different breed. When I perform badly on things, I'm not like most people that get destroyed and go on huge losing streaks. When I perform badly, I tend to just flatline for a bit and go around break even for a bit, like I did here or like I did here. If we look at like my pre-fight bets, we float around break even here, float around break even here, but I don't go on these massive losing streaks like some people where they get absolutely wrecked. We just steady the ship a little bit before always taking the next leg up, and that is quite simply what I've always done throughout my career, what I'm going to continue to do throughout my career. So for that reason, darts, football, UFC 2025 is going to be huge. Jump on board. Like, literally, what are you waiting for? Most of you guys watch my videos every week. You know by now what I'm capable of doing. Stood the test of time. Jump on board, don't sit on the fence, get involved, make some extra cash in 2025. So what we're going to be doing in this breakdown video is obviously running through all of the main card fights from UFC 311, and again, hopefully we can make a profit on this card. You've already seen so far, I do have a bet on Jamahal Hill, which we'll be explaining the reasons for that when we get into that breakdown for that fight. But we want to kick things off by talking about the fight between Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Islam Makhachev is a pretty big favourite at average odds of about 1.25, which are going to be minus 400 for an implied probability of 80%. If we take a look at the odds on Tsarukyan, he's around an average of 3.80, which is going to be plus 280 for an implied probability of 26%. So Makhachev is 33 years old, 5'10", with a 70.5-inch reach. Tsarukyan is 28 years old, 5'7", with a 72.5-inch reach. So there is the potential for Makhachev to have a bit of a size advantage over Tsarukyan here. This is one of those fights where I do want to see how they look at the stare down, because at lightweight, Tsarukyan's quite small at 5'7". They do have a similar sort of reach. In fact, Tsarukyan's got that slightly longer reach. But Makhachev is a big, strong, physically imposing lightweight. And if you go back and watch their first fight, I really think that the physicality was ultimately what led to Makhachev winning, because they're both very highly skilled MMA grapplers. The grappling exchanges were quite competitive. Makhachev got the better of them, but Tsarukyan definitely held his own. And I just think it was kind of like the size and the physicality of Makhachev which enabled him to big brother Tsarukyan a little bit in those grappling positions. And so, yeah, I would like to see how these two, when they face off, size could be the difference between these two. So the only other X factor that I really want to talk about on this one is the potential that Arman Tsarukyan may have a staph infection. Now, every once in a while, when a fighter does have a staph infection, they find a way to win, right? You know, Makhachev found a way to win against Dustin Poirier in his last fight when he had a staph infection. But generally, when fighters have staph infections, they lose the vast majority of the time, because it just completely destroys their cardio. The antibiotics they have to take to treat the staph infection, which if they don't take they could die, just completely ruins their cardio in the weeks surrounding the time frame where they have been battling that infection. So what I will do is leave a link in the description below to this video which shows that Tsarukyan may have a staph infection. You can see it's not the best picture here, but it kind of does look like staph. This was taken about a week ago, so this picture's fairly recent, and we know that when a fighter starts to take antibiotics for a staph infection, it does tend to cause them issues kind of in the 2-3 week period surrounding that infection being present. So if you've been watching my content for a long time, you'll know how I feel about situations like this. Ultimately, one of the most powerful tools we've got as a professional gambler or someone that bets on sports is we can choose when to put our money in danger and place a bet, or we can choose to just sit on the sidelines and not get involved. And that's a really powerful weapon. I think one of the big mistakes that people make when they try to make a profit betting on sports is they place far too many bets. Ultimately, betting markets, like most markets, are pretty efficient. So if you are placing a lot of bets, you may make, profit in the short term, a few months, a year, whatever, but I think long term you are going to get eaten alive because the market just isn't that inefficient. So if you're finding lots of bets, you're probably reading the strength of those bets incorrectly. So my perspective on a fight like this is I don't know whether Tsarukyan has a staph infection or not, and I'm not going to know for sure whether he has a staph infection or not. What I do know is that if he does have a staph infection, his chances of beating Makhachev, who in my opinion is the best fighter in the world right now, are probably less than 10%, 20% at a push. And so for that reason, I don't really have any interest in betting Tsarukyan, because if I do bet him and he does have a staph infection, before a punch is even thrown, my money's dead in the water and I've got barely any chance of winning. So in situations like this where there's ambiguity over the health of a fighter, potential injury, potential sickness, something like that, I just don't get involved. I'm the kind of guy that's like, I don't want to gamble. Whether he does or does not have a staph infection, I don't really care. I'm just not going to put my money in danger. Why do I need to put my money in danger on a fight like this when I've got major darts tournaments to bet every month, hundreds of football matches to bet every week, and a UFC event to bet pretty much every weekend from now until the end of the year? There are so many opportunities to make money. Why force bets in situations like this where we know we're not going to be stacking the odds in our favour because, Tsarukyan may be coming into this fight not 100% healthy. So straight away, the potential staph infection eliminates the possibility of a bet on Tsarukyan for me. But what I'm now going to do, as we talk about how both these guys match up from a technical point of view, is talk about how they match up stylistically. And I'm going to be focusing on how this fight is likely to look if both guys show up and perform to their full potential. So if both guys do show up and perform to their full potential and both guys are healthy, I actually think there's pretty good value on Tsarukyan at the current odds. This is mainly because we've seen both guys in really tough competitive fights, and I feel Tsarukyan is the one who has held up better. So if we consider the two fights that have been very competitive for Makhachev, the Poirier fight, the first Alexander Volkanovski fight, we saw that Makhachev struggled late on against Volkanovski despite having a very big size advantage over Volk in that fight. And obviously Poirier had a lot more success in Makhachev's last fight than I thought he would. He busted up Makhachev pretty good, defended himself much better than I thought he would in grappling positions. Now again, granted, Makhachev did have a staph infection in that matchup, which clearly impacted his performance, but still, Poirier was a pretty easy fight for Makhachev. Poirier is in the tail end of his career. He is on a decline in my opinion. He's taken a lot of damage in his career. Poirier's takedown offense, ground game isn't good. We've seen that in fights against guys like Michael Chandler. And so for that reason, I was quite surprised Makhachev, even with the staph infection, struggled as bad as he did against Dustin Poirier. I think if Tsarukyan fought Poirier, he would make it look very easy and totally dominate. So from my perspective, from a technical point of view, both these guys are very well matched. They're both very tough, but very durable. They're extremely well-rounded. They're both very high-level MMA grapplers. In fact, these two guys might be the two highest-level MMA grapplers in the sport. They both move very, very well on the feet. Both very good defensively. Both really good technical strikers. I know the odd, I know both of them have the odd knockout here and there, but generally speaking, they're more volume strikers than power punchers. And yeah, I just think this is a very well-matched fight. I just don't think the odds should be as wide as this. If both guys show up at 100%, both guys show up healthy, I think Tsarukyan is more than capable of winning this fight. And so, yeah, I would seriously consider betting him this weekend if it were not for that staph infection. So, in terms of the over/under on this one, very likely this fight goes deep in my opinion. Both guys are decisionators. You can see that, Maybe decisionator is not the correct expression to use for Makhachev. He does have a lot of finishes, but not at the level of opponent Tsarukyan is at. When he does face that higher level of opponent, like a Volkanovski or a Poirier, he does frequently go to a decision. He's also gone quite deep in fights against guys who are nowhere near Tsarukyan's level, like Moises and Dober. And of course, their first fight, I know it was 5 years ago, but their first fight went to a decision. There was never really any danger of the fight being finished. Tsarukyan, frequently goes deep in fights as well. Both these guys are well-rounded. I think the real risk of a finish in this one is if Tsarukyan does have a staph infection, he may become very tired early into this matchup and get to a point where he is too tired to defend himself. That is a certain possibility. But outside of that, if both guys show up healthy, I think this one very likely goes to a decision. I won't be betting it myself because the staph infection creates some ambiguity there, but you know, it is gambling, right? We don't know if the infection's there or not. In terms of props, this is one of those situations where you may want to lean into a potential staph infection for Tsarukyan and look at things like Makhachev to win in round 3 or Makhachev to win in round 4 or Makhachev to win in round 5 on the basis that the odds are very juicy and you don't have to hit a particularly high number of these bets over the long term to earn a profit. If Tsarukyan does have a staph infection, it's very unlikely, in my opinion, he survives 25 minutes with Makhachev. I think he will become too tired and at some point will get finished. So if you do want to bet on the potential that he's got a staph infection, this may be the best way to do it, because obviously the odds on Makhachev moneyline are unplayable. The odds on fight not to go to a decision also aren't great. And even if you were to look at something like the under 3.5 rounds, Tsarukyan is still a tough fucker that could quite easily, you know, survive into the 4th round. So yeah, I would personally look at one of those props, but I am totally passing on that fight. Hopefully we dig up something in live betting. Like I say, there were 14 fights on last week's card and we ended up placing 6 live bets and went 6-0. We absolutely crushed it, made a huge profit, almost 7 units. I'm very confident we'll make another profit this week. If you are not in the live betting group, like literally what is wrong with you? We are just going to print almost every weekend this year in live betting UFC. It's just, I'm the best in the world at it. Last week reminded me why I'm the best in the world at it. You guys need to jump on board before it's too late. I won't be here forever. So now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be the co-main event between Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Nurmagomedov is a pretty big favourite at average odds of about 1.30, which is going to be minus 333 for an implied probability of 77%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Dvalishvili, he's around an average of 3.45, which is going to be plus 245 for an implied probability of 29%. So Dvalishvili is 34 years old, 5'6" with a 68-inch reach. Nurmagomedov, 29 years old, 5'8" with a 69-inch reach. So Nurmagomedov a little bit longer and taller than Dvalishvili. No other major X factors there, aside from the fact that Dvalishvili does appear to have a pretty nasty infection on his leg. Now this doesn't look like staph. At least it doesn't look like staph to me. This looks more like a cut that has been infected. You can see like a bit of a cut has developed there, bit of a cut has developed there. When it's staph, it's usually like one singular, like circular infection with like a cut or a hole or a crater in the middle, and then kind of like the infected ring on the outside. This to me looks like an impact wound because it's very rare, or at least I've not seen staph in the UFC where it's been in like 2 locations close by. This indicates to me that Dvalishvili has cut his leg once there and once there, and both cuts have basically got infected. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, but that's just my perception of this situation, having you know, bet on this sport for 15 years. And so vintage polo _22. I'll leave a link in the description below, so you guys can follow him or thank him for posting this or whatever you want to do. But yeah, MMA Mania, SB Nation website have written an article on this. So, you know, at the end of the day, we've already given, or I've already explained how I feel about things like this. I don't know if this is going to affect Dvalishvili in the fight. It might be a giant nothing burger. It might be huge. It might have a huge impact on his performance. But again, one of the biggest weapons that we've got as professional gamblers and people that bet on this sport is choosing when to put our money in danger and choosing what fights to bet on. When we have major darts tournaments to bet every month, hundreds of football matches to bet every week, and a UFC event to bet almost every weekend this year. There is no need to be fucking around gambling on guys that have a leg that looks like this. So straight away, not interested in betting Dvalishvili. He could win easily this weekend, look like the greatest fighter of all time. I don't care. I'm going to sit this one out, save my money, and focus on something where I know I can stack the odds in my favour. When you bet on a guy whose leg looks like this, you are not stacking the odds in your favour. And we will also talk about how this kind of leg issue may have an even bigger impact on Dvalishvili's chance of winning this weekend when we talk about how these two match up stylistically. So irrespective of the issue with Dvalishvili's leg, I have been saying for a few weeks now, when guys in the Discord have asked me how I feel about this fight, if I think there's value on Dvalishvili, they've been asking me how I see this fight going, and I've said all along, I think this is an extremely easy fight for Umar Nurmagomedov, to the extent where this could turn out to be one of Umar Nurmagomedov's easiest fights in the UFC. Now, whenever I make statements like this, people rush to the comments to call me a fool and a clown and a fraud and a clueless idiot that do not know what they're talking about, because with Dvalishvili being the current champ, one of the best fighters in the world, how could I be so disrespectful to make a statement such as that when Dvalishvili has beaten so many good guys, and he's bound to be a tough test for everyone. The way in which I would respond to that is styles make fights, and so every fighter matches up in a specific way with every other fighter based on the strengths and weaknesses that both guys have. So when you look at Dvalishvili's strengths and weaknesses, he is the worst stylistic matchup for most guys in the division, because he's tough as nails, he's got cardio for days, he never gets tired, he's absolutely relentless, he's got great chain wrestling, good grappling control, and he's got the ability to persistently grapple, relentlessly grapple, non-stop, action-packed, big drama show for 25 minutes without barely breaking a sweat. He can stick to you like glue and wet blanket you like very few guys we've ever seen being able to do that for as long as Dvalishvili can do it, and at the intensity that Dvalishvili can do it. But the problem with Dvalishvili's style, in fact, there are a couple of problems with Dvalishvili's style, and we've spoken about these previously when we broke down his fight against Sean O'Malley. Dvalishvili's striking's very low level, so he does get dinged a lot in fights. We've seen him get rocked, wobbled, dropped many times in his fights. And because he doesn't have striking to set up his takedowns, he will struggle against guys that have very good takedown defense and aren't at risk of being tired out by his relentlessness, which is basically what Umar Nurmagomedov is. If you go and watch Dvalishvili's fight against Henry Cejudo, which was only a couple fights ago, Cejudo totally handled Dvalishvili in the first round. He dominated the first round. He lit Dvalishvili up on the feet, neutralized the threat of Dvalishvili's grappling, stuffed every takedown, held Dvalishvili down easily. Round one of that fight was a cakewalk for Cejudo, but then of course Dvalishvili's pace got to Cejudo, he wore him down, and he was able to backdoor a decision in the second half of the fight. So the reason why I like Nurmagomedov so much in this matchup is because I don't think Nurmagomedov is going to get worn down by Dvalishvili's grappling for two reasons. Well, actually three reasons. The first reason being Nurmagomedov has got very good cardio. We saw that in the Corey Sandhagen fight. Now, granted, Sandhagen doesn't have the same style, the same relentlessness as Dvalishvili, and grappling is obviously, a very exhausting part of the sport. So Sandhagen's not going to be able to make Nurmagomedov work in the same way that Sandhagen is. But Nurmagomedov did go hard for 25 minutes at a very high pace in the Sandhagen fight. For me, his cardio was proven in that matchup. His cardio looks legit. The second reason why I don't think Nurmagomedov is at risk of being worn down here is because I don't think Dvalishvili is going to be able to wet blanket Nurmagomedov like he's been able to wet blanket other opponents. If you look at his fights against Sean O'Malley or Henry Cejudo, or let's put some more names out there, Peter Yan in particular, what makes Dvalishvili so difficult to deal with is that he sticks to you like glue. So when he shoots that takedown, if he doesn't get it, he stays tight to you, beats you up in the clinch, continues to work for it. And being able to stick to his opponents like glue wears them down, tires them out, so that the longer the fight goes, the more success he then starts to have with his grappling and hitting takedowns, because his opponents become too tired to defend the takedowns. I don't think that Dvalishvili is going to be able to stick to Nurmagomedov like glue. I think when Dvalishvili does shoot takedowns on Nurmagomedov, I think Nurmagomedov is going to be able to sprawl out of them, shrug Dvalishvili off, and circle back and get to the middle of the octagon. I think Dvalishvili is going to have a lot of trouble staying tight to Nurmagomedov in this fight, which means I think Dvalishvili is going to be forced to stand and strike a lot, which is another reason why I think this is going to be a very easy fight for Nurmagomedov. We saw in the Corey Sandhagen fight, his striking's legit. Sandhagen, one of the best strikers in the division, probably top 3. He's up there with O'Malley, he's up there with Peter Yan. Sandhagen's an absolute sniper on the feet. We saw where he did the Yadong Song, we saw where he did the Marlon Vera. Yet Nurmagomedov outstruck him in that fight. Now granted, the threat of Nurmagomedov's grappling opened up opportunities for him to outstrike Sandhagen, but still, Nurmagomedov's striking has always looked great. We know Dvalishvili is vulnerable to being knocked out, and we know that he's very reckless when he comes inside looking for the takedown. He tends to run forward in straight lines, which means he's wide open to Nurmagomedov's big counters. So I think that we could see a much more timid, a much more gun-shy version of Dvalishvili this weekend, because Nurmagomedov's footwork, his movement, his ability to read takedown entries is so much higher than any of the guys Dvalishvili has been fighting in recent years, that when Dvalishvili does come forward looking for the takedown, he's going to be at constant risk of being knocked out, eating big counters, and I think that'll make him reluctant, or a lot more reluctant, to engage Nurmagomedov than he has been to engage guys like Henry Cejudo or Sean O'Malley, because even though obviously the threat of the counter is huge with Sean O'Malley, Dvalishvili knows if he gets in on his legs, he can stick tight to O'Malley, wear him down. You're not necessarily going to get that with Nurmagomedov. He could easily shrug Dvalishvili off and force him to stand and strike. So this is a very hard fight for Dvalishvili. I think Nurmagomedov's going to win easily. Even if a fully healthy Dvalishvili without the leg infection or whatever the fuck's going on with his right leg shows up, even if Dvalishvili puts in the best performance of his career, I think Nurmagomedov is still going to make this look easy. And I think we're going to get the second champion crowned this weekend with the surname Nurmagomedov. I'd be very, very, very surprised if Nurmagomedov were to lose this to the extent where, as much as I think Dvalishvili is amazing, one of the best fighters in the world, Nurmagomedov is very tempting as a parlay leg this weekend if I can find someone to parlay with him, which may not be too difficult actually, because we've got tons of big favourites on this card, although at the moment I haven't found any I like enough to throw into a parlay with Mr. Nurmagomedov. So in terms of the over-under on this fight, it's quite likely this fight goes to a decision. Quite likely. We do have to bear a few things in mind though. Nurmagomedov did have good success with his leg kicks against Sandhagen, and obviously with Dvalishvili's right leg impaired now with that infection, who knows, Nurmagomedov could chop that leg down and get a stoppage. What I would say though is the infection appears to be the right leg, and Dvalishvili fights southpaw orthodox most of the time, so this right leg will be somewhat protected because his lead leg will obviously be his left leg. So it's not at risk, like huge risk of the leg kicks, but something to consider. If Nurmagomedov beats up the left leg, then Dvalishvili doesn't really have the option of switching southpaw, because this leg is already pretty damaged. In actual fact, I'm just going to fact check if Dvalishvili is... just bear with me a second. I always want to fact check. I think he's an orthodox stance fighter, but I never want to throw statements out unless I'm 100% sure. Yeah, so on UFC stats, it says Dvalishvili's orthodox stance. So that right leg is somewhat going to be protected from Nurmagomedov's leg kicks. So yeah, in terms of the over-under on this one, very likely it goes to a decision, but the odds are pretty shit. They don't get me excited, so I would probably pass on that if I were you. In terms of the prop bets on this one, the only one I would consider would be Nurmagomedov by decision, but the odds are absolutely terrible, so you might want to give that one a miss. And now we move on to maybe the people's main event, right? Because I do think Nurmagomedov and Makhachev, especially if Tsarukyan and Dvalishvili are injured, do have infections coming in this weekend, are likely to make those fights relatively one-sided, although a healthy Tsarukyan, I think, can cause Makhachev a lot of problems. So this is kind of like the people's main event, right? Jiri Prochazka versus Jamahal Hill. And one of the very few fights on this card that is actually in the even money odds range, where the odds are kind of playable on both guys. And so this is a very interesting fight for betting. Let's get into it. So obviously, a few days ago, I posted that I was going to bet on Jamahal Hill this weekend. And we've been on an amazing run in pre-fight betting, where we hit two very nice winners last weekend. Bruno Lopez came through for us as a real big underdog against Magomed Gadzhizulov, which was nice. If you watched my YouTube video or my breakdown video on my website last week for the fight between Amanda Ribas Mackenzie Dern, you'll know I was considering a bet on Dern. I did pull the trigger on her and we were able to win that. Did lose a bet on Arman Tavares before Christmas, but then we hit a winner on fight doesn't go to a decision on the Doo Ho Choi Nate Landwehr matchup. We hit a winner on Carlos Hernandez to beat this guy whose name I'm definitely not going to try and pronounce again because it was hard enough during fight week. Placed our biggest bet of the year in 2024 on Jake Paul to beat Mike Tyson. He came through for us in a big way. We did lose this bet, but then we hit a nice winner on Sergey Siddy to beat Garrett Armfield, a nice winner on Jasmine Jasdavicius to beat Ariane Lipsky, and a nice winner on Elise Reed to beat Jessica Penne. So since mid-October, we've been doing really well on the old pre-fight bets here, and it's a beautiful thing. Absolutely crushed it in live betting last week. Went 6-0 in live betting, 2-0 pre-fight betting, 8-0 total, and all told we made approximately 10 units of profit on last week's card, which is absolutely mad, and I'm confident we'll have another profit this week. Hopefully Jamahal Hill is a part of that profit, right? It's the only pre-fight bet we've got so far. I may add more as the week progresses. Still got some fights research on this card, and as ever, probably going to have a good amount of action live betting this card. And since we make a profit on 70% of UFC events, very good chance we'll make a profit live betting this one too. If you're not in my live betting group, ask yourself why. It's an absolute no-brainer. Since I've been around since 2016, we've made a profit almost every week. Literally, what are you waiting for? If you watch every UFC event live, it's a no-brainer. You're basically getting paid to watch the sport you love. So, let's jump into it. So, if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Jamahal Hill is the favourite at average odds of about 1.77, which is going to be minus 130 for an implied probability of 57%. If we take a look at the odds on Jiri Prochazka, he's around an average of 2.10, which is going to be plus 110 for an implied probability of 48%. So very close to 50-50 in the eyes of the bookies. Jamahal Hill with a slight favourite edge, and his odds are declining. And I think there's a good chance his odds will continue to decline as the fight draws nearer. I was quite surprised this fight was in the even money odds range. I assumed that Hill would be in that sort of 1.50 minus 200 range, but I think the fact that Hill is a deeply unpopular character within the MMA community, and the fact that Jiri Prochazka is kind of loved and adored with that samurai kind of vibe and very respectful and a unique character. I think this is a WWE type situation that we do see in the UFC quite regularly, to be fair, where instead of people really focusing on how two fighters match up skill for skill, they're focusing on very much on other things like the character and personality of a fighter. I think to some degree this is the reason why we were able to hit our winner on Bruno Lopez last week, because despite the fact that if you would have spent just an hour researching the matchup between these two, you would have seen that Bruno Lopez was better than Magomed Gadzhizulov in pretty much every single aspect of MMA. Because Gadzhizulov was from Dagestan and had a beard, everyone just assumed he was amazing. He was a big favourite for absolutely no reason at all. It was not steeped in reality. And we saw in that fight, where Lopez outworked him both striking and on the ground and in the clinch for the main part. Why these odds were absolutely ridiculous. And we had an amazing deal on Bruno Lopez last week. Maybe we can dig up some more winners this week. Maybe Jamahal Hill will come through for us. This is probably a good time to remind you guys that both Jamahal Hill and Jiri Prochazka are extremely dangerous strikers. They both have true legit knockout power. This fight can end in an instant at any time. So if Jamahal Hill gets knocked out in 30 seconds, sent to the Shadow Realm, really doesn't mean a whole lot, guys. We all lose bets. It's part of the game. Don't sweat it. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't sweat individual losses. If you're a member of my community and Jamahal Hill loses, I know you're not really going to give a fuck. We perform really well on everything that we do, so you understand it's just part of the game. But for the people that watch these videos on YouTube, I just don't think they live on planet Earth sometimes, if I'm being honest. It's like, if you lose a bet, it's like you're a fraud, you're clueless, it was so obvious you were wrong, blah 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 blah. It's like, okay mate, literally, okay, whatever you say. Do you know what I mean? We make a profit on everything we do, have done for 15 years, but naturally you're not going to win every bet. It's fucking impossible, especially when you're betting on cage fights to the death. So why are we betting on Jamahal Hill in this fight? Well, as ever, just like we did last week with Mackenzie Dern, if you go back and watch my breakdown video for the Mackenzie Dern-Amanda Ribas fight, we will show you footage in that fight which kind of explained the reasons why I liked Mackenzie Dern in that matchup. We'll do the same here with Jamahal Hill. Like I say, it doesn't mean it's going to win, but what it does mean is at least when you pull the trigger, lock in your own bet, you will understand the reasons why we're doing it, the logic why we're doing it. We're not just guessing here. We know our edge. We know what our edge is. We know why this is a plus EV bet. We know why we are overwhelmingly stacking the odds in our favour when we bet on Jamahal Hill this weekend. I'll show you footage in a moment so that you can understand why, see for yourself. But if we talk about how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, let's quickly go through the tail of the tape. Jamahal Hill, 33 years old, 6'4", 79-inch reach. Jiri Prochazka, 32 years old, 6'3", 80-inch reach. So both guys about the same size, about the same age. Nothing going on there. What is interesting though is that they're both coming into this fight on the back of a pretty brutal knockout. The Jamahal Hill knockout against Alex Pereira was pretty bad. The Jiri Prochazka knockout against Alex Pereira was even worse. So Potan is dishing out some pretty savage brain trauma to these two boys, and they are both in their first fight back after suffering a pretty big knockout loss. So this is an important thing to talk about for a few moments, because when you are knocked out like that, it can change you forever. It affects your confidence. Sometimes it affects you physically, right? If you look at a guy like Cody Garbrandt, he used to be very durable, and then all of a sudden, you know, you'd only have to flick his chin to knock him out. It can physically affect your durability when you suffer big knockouts. So Jamahal Hill could be dealing with some confidence issues this weekend, perhaps some performance anxiety coming into this fight. I do think with both these guys coming into this fight on the back of very brutal knockouts, it's possible that you get a very bad performance from one of these guys where they don't show up and perform to their full potential. You know, sometimes after a really bad loss like that, you know, the performance anxiety that comes from being afraid that'll happen again puts you into a defensive shell, and then you can't really open up and perform to your full potential. I could really see that happening with both Hill and Prochazka, or Hill or Prochazka. And so if you are betting on this fight this weekend, just know that whoever you go with might turn up and look like shit, because they've still got that anxiety from being sent to the Shadow Realm, you know, the last time they were in a cage fight to the death. And both these guys are scary, right? They both have true legit knockout power, and they will both want, I would imagine, to show each other some respect. And so what's interesting about both these guys coming into this fight on the back of a really brutal knockout is that they're usually very aggressive. Certainly more so with Jiri. Jiri's a guy that likes to take control of the centre of the octagon, put his opponents onto the back foot, crowd them in an uncomfortable range and force them to constantly engage. He's very, very aggressive. Because of that, he does put himself at risk of being knocked out, taking big damage. But that's kind of his brand. That's kind of his style. Hill's not quite as aggressive as Jiri, because he's not relentless with the forward pressure, but he can be if he senses his opponent's tired or hurt, or if he starts to feel himself and take control of the striking exchanges. Hill's one of these guys that doesn't mind taking a shot to give a shot. And so with both these guys being very aggressive, I am interested to see if the knockout loss to Pereira changes the style of both guys, and perhaps if they both fight a lot more cautiously this weekend. If that happens, I very much favour Hill in this matchup, because for me, he is by far the more technical striker out of the two, and when we show you some footage, you'll understand the reasons why I hold that opinion. I just think if these two are going to get into a friendly point fighting kickboxing contest in the middle of the octagon, Hill would win this a very high percentage of the time, to the extent where I do think Jiri's only real chance of winning this fight is by brutal knockout, which is kind of what Jiri does. So it's not like when I make that statement, it's like, oh, his only chance of winning is puncher's chance. No, it's fucking what Jiri does. He KOs people dead. So, you know, he can KO Hill for sure. But I don't think he can outpoint or outstrike Hill. I could be mistaken. But we'll get into the reasons why in just a little bit. So, in terms of how these two match up stylistically, I wouldn't expect there to be any grappling in this fight. Yes, you see Jiri shoot the odd takedown against Pereira, but for the most part, both these guys like to stand and bang. Hill's very difficult to take down and hold down. Usually, if you take Hill down, he can quickly work his way back up to his feet. We saw that against Thiago Santos. We saw that against Glover Teixeira. Jiri's not a particularly good wrestler. Therefore, I don't see this fight going to the ground. This should be a stand-up fight. If this fight stays standing, fundamentally, Jamahal Hill is a significantly better striker than Jiri Prochazka. He's better defensively, he moves better on the feet, he's faster, more accurate, better combinations, just an all-round better striker. I know Jiri's very fun to watch. I know that he's a very dangerous fighter. You know, you never know what he's going to throw. Flying knees, spinning elbows, crazy combinations. You know, you can't count Jiri out against anyone. Jiri's capable of KOing anyone in the division on his night. But skill for skill, if both these guys show up to their full potential, there's quite a big skill gap between these two when it comes to striking. And I'm going to show you a bit of footage now so that you can understand where I'm coming from. So, obviously we're always better off focusing on recent fights, because fighters are on a continuous journey of self-improvement. Therefore, we never want to use footage that's too old, because it could be outdated. Fighters could have improved and tightened up weaknesses that we focus on in video footage. But what we are going to do is spend a bit of time on this one. Usually I skim through footage and show you guys kind of little clips and stuff to illustrate points I'm going to make. But I think for the purposes of understanding the reasons why I like Jamahal Hill this weekend, you're going to need to see a decent amount of footage on Jiri, so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. So we're going to focus on the Rakic fight, which was only just over a year ago, but Jiri's only fought once since this fight. So important at this stage to also point out that Hill is a far better boxer than Rakic. So Rakic's style of striking is kicks based. He likes to throw leg kicks, head kicks, but Rakic's boxing's not the best. Hill's base in striking is boxing. Fast hands, good combinations, true legit knockout power. So what that means is, if we use this fight as a measuring stick, if we accept that Hill is a far better boxer than Rakic, and we can see in this fight that Rakic has a lot of success with his boxing, common sense tells us that Hill should have a lot more success with boxing than Rakic does. Now, granted, Hill may underperform because he may be low on confidence after that knockout loss. It's also worth considering that Hill has a big ego, talks a lot of shit online, and that can add a lot of pressure and performance anxiety. You know, we see this kind of thing with Israel Adesanya. You know, he's got a big ego. People love to bash him online, and he kind of rises to it. And that has, I believe, had detrimental impacts on some of Izzy's performances against some guys that he should have beaten quite easily and struggled against. But then you've got other guys like Ian Gary that are hated by the MMA community, take a lot of shit online, you know, have big egos, talk a lot of shit back. and it doesn't seem to affect them. If anything, it fuels them, because Ian Gary's looked fantastic in some of his recent fights. You know, even though he lost to Rakhmonov, I thought he looked great. So what you're seeing in the first minute and a half of this fight between Rakic and Jiri is a feeling out process. Neither guy's really landed too much. Both guys are trying to find their range, and at the moment Prochazka is showing Rakic a lot of respect here. Not really engaging him too much. Therefore, Rakic hasn't really landed very much yet. The reason why I'm not showing you Jiri's last fight against Pereira is because pretty much the entire fight was Jiri doing what he's doing here to Rakic, where he doesn't really engage Rakic too much at all. He didn't really engage Pereira too much at all. But then when Jiri starts to feel a little bit more confident that he's finding his range and he wants to let his hands go and score some points, score some strikes, when he starts to attack Pereira, he gets dropped at the end of round 1, put away at the beginning of round 2. And what you'll see in this fight is we're now around about the halfway mark. And in the first half of this round, Rakic doesn't land a lot because Jiri's staying just outside the range where he can be hit. And so Jiri's not really in that range where Rakic can land. And Rakic is still finding his range as well. But what you see about 10 seconds ago, around about the midway point of this first round, is Jiri starts to think, okay, second half of the round, this is a close round. I need to score some points. I need to land some strikes to try and win this round. So Jiri starts to get more aggressive here. And when he does, you start to see his striking defense get exposed pretty bad. So as he comes forward, just keep an eye on the shots he absorbs here in the second half of this round. So we said Rakic not the best boxer, but he's got good head movement, good footwork. I would say Rakic is better defensively than Hill. He's just not as good with his hands. But he's countering Jiri with that leg kick. You can see that Jiri's not really paying much attention to the leg kick. He's just kind of letting Rakic have it, but he's not reading it at all. And now when you can see, watch this now. So in a few moments, you'll see Jiri kind of bounce around, you know, light on his feet. That's a little bit of a tell from Jiri that he's kind of psyching himself up to come forward and attack Rakic with a big shot or draw Rakic into a big exchange. He's kind of psyching himself up. See how he's kind of bouncing in front of Rakic? That's Jiri trying to mentally prepare himself for getting into a big exchange. I mean, this is something we see him do a lot. And very experienced high-level strikers like Alex Pereira will read that and obviously send him to the Shadow Realm, which is exactly what they did. So now you can start to see Rakic rack up the strikes, right? He's beaten up the lead leg and he's cut Jiri above that right eye. And so Jiri feels he's starting to lose this round, starts to become more aggressive. But as he becomes more aggressive, Rakic just starts to pick him off. And you can see Jiri start to get really sloppy with attacks like this, where just throws a naked leg kick and walks onto a big right-hand counter. See, he walks right onto a big right-hand counter there. And he tries to get it back. But you can just see, again, Rakic lands the clean right hand. And Jiri starts to become a bit of a sitting duck here. In this range, he's not reading Rakic at all. And he's eating some big shots. He's doing a good job of keeping the pressure up, but very little end product from Jiri here. And in the final minute, you can see it's another clean right hand there. And it's worth noting, Rakic isn't a good boxer. Jamahal Hill, far better boxer. Far better. Better combinations, more power, faster, more accurate. See again, lands a clean right hand there on Jiri. You can just see Jiri fights with his hands down low, chin up high and exposed. Jiri just wants to brawl. But against technicians like Alex Pereira, Alexander Rakic, Jamahal Hill, it can get you into a lot of trouble. Like, look, he just eats a nice clean combination there. Like, yes, Jiri won this fight against Rakic, but when he tried to use You know, again, look, he just eats a clean right hand there. This style worked against Rakic. He did take a lot of damage, but eventually got the win. But then when he uses this style against a very high-level technical striker like Pereira, his luck kind of runs out. He gets dropped bad at the end of round 1 and then sent to the Shadow Realm in round 2. So, again, just not reading that leg kick at all. Rakic destroying the legs. Now, Rakic is a very good kicker. Disguises the leg kicks well. Hill's not as good of a kicker as Jiri. Not as good of a kicker as Rakic. Doesn't really throw many leg kicks. But like, look at this, guys. Look at this. Look at this, right? This goes to show how low level of a striker Jiri is. We've been saying throughout the entire first round that Jiri doesn't read leg kicks. Like, Rakic is just hammering these legs. Jiri he's planted, he's not seeing them coming. But the concerning thing for Jiri is that he doesn't read the head strikes either. We see this in round 1 with the amount of clean, hard right hands that Rakic was able to land. But at least at times in round 1, Jiri was kind of backing up or, you know, moving in a way where the strike didn't land with full impact. Watch this one. Like, how Jiri doesn't get knocked out here, I don't know. Because watch his feet. His feet are planted here. It's amazing he doesn't get knocked out with this punch. So you can see there, he's late to react to the jab. But what he doesn't realise is the jab is setting him up for the power right hand. So the jab misses. But look how clean this lands. Right on the chin. He just doesn't see it coming. Like, he has to know, as a professional mixed martial artist, a high-level striker, that jabs usually set up the power right hand. So the fact that he doesn't pay any attention to the fact that a big follow-up right hand might be coming here, and the fact his legs are that planted, just shows he is a sit-in duck. And how he doesn't get dropped there, I will never know. It just shows how tough Jiri is. It shows how durable he is. It shows how good his chin is. But his chin isn't bulletproof. Alex Pereira has shown that twice. His chin is not bulletproof. And the thing is, if he keeps taking these kind of shots, keeps taking this kind of damage, Jiri is going to have a very short career. Because he's just a sitting duck. And I do think there's a really good chance Jamahal Hill knocks him out this weekend. So he then lands a big shot, big right hand on Rakic. But it's a big counter right hand there, you know. Rakic is trying to back him up, get some respect in there. Jiri is just like, fuck this shit, let's turn it into a war. The samurai code, right? Kill or be killed. Wants to go out on his shield. Big head kick. Beginning of the end. But even in these exchanges, Jiri's eating big counters. It's just Rakic can't back him up now. And then Jiri kind of just bum rushes Rakic. But very reckless. Even here in these sequences, he's so reckless. And I think Rakic was just overwhelmed by the aggression of Jiri. It's got to be demoralising as well to land so many clean hard shots on Jiri and not get a finish. Nice right hand there from Jiri. Rakic obviously hurt. That's all she wrote. Game over. Jiri with the win. Herb, you going to stop it? You going to stop it, Herb? You going to stop it? Even there, Rakic is landing clean hard right hands. But over any second now. Come on, Herb. We got other fights to break down, my guy. Hurry the fuck up. Can't be bothered. You guys get the idea, right? You guys get the idea. So, yeah. Ultimately, you can never count Jiri out in a cage fight to the death. If he goes and knocks Jamahal Hill out this weekend, it's one of those things. It's sports betting. You can't go swimming without getting wet. You have to take the loss like a man and deal with it. But ultimately, when you look at how these two match up stylistically, how bad defensively, how reckless Jiri is, in a face-punching contest to the death, I think Hill's better defensively. I think he's more dangerous offensively because he's more accurate. He's faster. He's more technical. Moves better defensively, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, both guys in the even money odds range. I would cap Hill at least 65% here, which gives us a real nice margin of value over his current odds, which carry an implied probability of 57%. That would be a nice 8% margin. But I don't cap Hill at 100%. You got to recognise Jiri's dangerous enough to knock him out. So be a man about it, man. You know, be a man about it if Jiri wins this weekend. Take the loss on the chin. And like I say, major darts tournaments we can bet every month. Hundreds of football matches to bet every week. And an epic UFC event for us to bet and make money on almost every weekend in 2025. 2025 is going to be a huge year for us. Confident overall we'll make another profit this week. We're already up on darts this week. We're also up on football this week. Can we hit the trifecta, make a profit on UFC as well? We will see. So in terms of the over-under on this one, I would be very surprised if this fight went to a decision. And you can see the odds reflect that with it being at steep favourite odds. The only thing I will say is sometimes when you get two guys that are very dangerous, very aggressive, sometimes a fight ends up going to a decision because you get an awkward chess match where both guys show each other so much respect that neither of them really does anything. The best example of this I can think of was when Francis Ngannou fought Derek Lewis very, very long time ago. Both guys were on this run of like bodying guys, like just knockouts galore, some of those devastating, brutal knockouts in the history of the sport. And then they faced each other, and everyone was expecting a brutal knockout. And I think the odds on fight not to go to a decision was something like 1.10 minus 1,000. And then neither guy barely landed a punch in 15 minutes, and it sailed to a decision. I don't think that's what's going to happen here. But with both guys coming in off the back of a brutal knockout loss, with there being a lot of pressure on both guys this weekend, we could see performance anxiety affect both of them, and they could look a little more gun-shy than usual. So that would be the basis for betting on this fight to go to decision, but obviously it's not the most likely outcome, and the odds reflect that. In terms of the most likely outcomes for the props, I think most likely outcome is Hill by knockout or TKO, but the odds are very, very bad on that, so you might want to give that a miss. But I hope you found that breakdown useful. Let me know what you think. Who do you think is going to win this fight this weekend? Now let's move in to the next fight on this card, which is going to be Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Moicano is the slight favourite at average odds of about, where are you, Mr. Moicano? There you are. He's the average. Oh, actually, it's pretty big odds spread. Let me just refresh this and see if we've got more of a tightening range on the odds. Okay, so Moicano is around about an average of, call it 1.62, which is going to be minus 161 for an implied probability of 62%. If we take a look at the odds on Dariush, he's around an average of 2.35, which is going to be plus 135 for an implied probability of 43%. So Dariush is 35 years old, 5'10" with a 72-inch reach. Moicano, 35 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach also. So both guys about the same size and are the same age. And they've also got a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses. One thing that's very difficult about trying to predict the outcome of this fight is that both guys are on a pretty steep decline in my opinion. However, they both show up and at times put in amazing performances because they have favourable stylistic matchups against their opponents. And so the decline from these two may not always be the most obvious, but it is certainly there, and it's probably a result of both of them having quite a lot of fights for their age. You know, Moicano's had 26 pro fights, and Dariush has had 29, which is a lot. Both guys have also been competing against some of the best fighters in the world for a very long time. They've got a lot of miles on the clock, a lot of injuries, they've taken a lot of damage, that kind of thing. So straight away, I do think that the chins of both these guys are declining. Now, Moicano's chin is totally shot, doesn't take much to knock him out. Dariush more durable in my opinion, but chin also still definitely on the decline. Now, when it comes to cardio, this is an interesting one because they are quite inconsistent when it comes to cardio, in the sense that sometimes in fights their cardio will look bad, and then other times in fights it will look good. So for example, if you look at Moicano, he gassed very bad against Drew Dober, but outside of that he's never really gassed before. Yes, he slowed down against RDA, but he took that fight on short notice in a weight class above where he usually fights, so I don't want to be too harsh on him for that. Generally speaking, Moicano's got great cardio, but his cardio looked dreadful in the Dober fight. Perhaps he was sick, perhaps he was injured, who knows. But it does add another layer of unpredictability when you're betting a Moicano fight. With Dariush, to be fair, cardio's been a big issue for Dariush throughout his career. Dariush has slowed down in most of his fights that went 3 rounds. But then, against Mateusz Gamrot, which I know was back in 2022, but it was only, 2-3 fights ago, his cardio looked great, which is very, very surprising because Gamrot pushed a high pace, and you would have thought that Dariush would have tired out, but he didn't. He had the energy to kind of outwork and outlast Gamrot in that fight, which is quite a surprise. So the problem with Dariush is obviously we haven't really seen him or too much of him for the last 2 years because these 2 fights ended very quickly, and he is coming to this fight after just over a year layoff. So we don't really know where Dariush is at this stage in his career. So after explaining all this, this is my way of kind of saying to you, if you do bet this fight, I think there's a lot of scope for random shit to happen that you can't predict. So I think it's very difficult to trust either one of these guys. They're not the kind of fighters like Mackenzie Dern where you know exactly what you're going to get from her. Win or lose last weekend, we knew exactly what Mackenzie Dern's strengths and weaknesses were like, what her durability was like, what her cardio was like. We had all the boxes ticked, all the questions answered. Dariush and Moicano, there's a lot of uncertainties and a lot of unknowns. And whenever you're betting on a fight or a football match or anything, any sport, you want to put your money in situations where there aren't really that many unanswered questions. You've got a lot of information to work with. Whenever you've got fighters like this, where there's a lot of unanswered questions, it does descend more into the gambling sphere, which I personally try to avoid at all costs. So in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, it's difficult to give you a very comprehensive explanation of how these two match up without talking just for about an hour on this fight alone, because with both of them being inconsistent, if I was going to give you a really comprehensive breakdown, what I would have to do is talk about how the different versions of both guys we've seen match up against the different versions of one another. I'm not going to do that, or we're going to be here all day. If I was betting this fight, I would do it, but since I'm not betting this fight, I'll keep all that knowledge in my brain and use it for live betting instead. Hopefully we'll be able to make a profit on this live betting. We make a profit on approximately 70% of UFC events. We went 6-0 on last week's event in live betting. We made almost 7 units of profit. 2025 is going to be huge. We make a profit every single year. This is a big cash cow for us. I am the best in the world. Not in the UFC live betting group. Why? At this point, if you watch every UFC event live, you're basically getting paid to watch the UFC. It's an absolute no-brainer. The money you will make from live betting with me will by far outweigh the subscription fees. It is a fucking no-brainer. Sign up now before the spaces go. I'm telling you right now, I'm doing major damage in 2025. We're going to make a lot of money. Jump on board now while you still can. The spaces will fill up. They're not going to be available forever, especially if we keep banging out profits like we did last weekend, which, to be honest, is very likely we will. So back to this fight, Moicano versus Dariush. So if both guys show up and perform to their full potential, Dariush has quite a big advantage when it comes to striking. This is because any version that we've seen of Moicano in recent years has looked very fragile on the feet. His reflexes look to have gone, can't take a shot like he used to, and he's very chinny. Dariush, while his chin's not as good as he used to be, he is more durable than Moicano. He hits hard, he's got a nasty kicking game, and on the feet, he will land the harder, more impactful shots. Moicano is more of a volume striker. He can't really cause much of a problem to Dariush on the feet. And when you look at how both these guys match up striking, I just don't see what Moicano could do to Dariush to cause him a problem. I think whenever these guys engage, Moicano is going to be at constant risk of being knocked out. Dariush, in my opinion, has a pretty big advantage when it comes to striking. But when it comes to grappling, this one does get more interesting. So Beneil Dariush, very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Moicano, also very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Both these guys are extremely good grapplers. Like, there's no way to get around it. I would give Moicano the advantage on the ground for one reason only. That reason being, Moicano's grappling control is amazing. So both these guys have got a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But what Moicano has done is kind of evolve that base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into very high-level MMA grappling, where he's got brilliant grappling control, very good wrestling to go with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Moicano has also understood the importance of position over submission in mixed martial arts, where Moicano's not one of these guys that rushes to attack with submissions or rushes to advance position on the ground and risk losing the dominant position he's already got. Moicano's very patient and he focuses on control and position, which is what scores points in MMA and wins rounds. Moicano focuses much more on maintaining position and smashing you with ground and pound than risk advancing position or attacking with a submission and losing the position he worked so hard to obtain in the first place. This is different with Dariush. Dariush, more of a BJJ guy, very high level on the ground, but much less positionally aware. He focuses much more on fast, offensive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submissions, and he does give up position a hell of a lot more than Moicano. So if both these guys get into a grappling match, in an MMA contest, I favour Moicano, because ultimately, in MMA, in grappling, or when it comes to grappling in MMA, 9 times out of 10, the guy in a dominant position is going to be the one scoring points and winning the round. And because Moicano is way more focused on position than Dariush is, it's more likely that if they go to the ground, Moicano will be the guy winning that position. What I would say about this fight when it comes to grappling is that Dariush isn't easy to take down and hold down. And this was one of the big reasons why he was able to beat Gamrot. Now, for me, you guys know, if you've watched my channel for a while, I don't rate Gamrot's MMA grappling at all. For years I've said he is bang average, and now we're starting to see him get exposed with some of his recent losses. I personally feel when it comes to MMA grappling, Moicano is levels and levels and levels and levels and levels above Gamrot. It is not even close. Moicano is a significantly better MMA grappler than Gamrot, to the extent where he's in a different universe. So just because Dariush was able to neutralize the threat of Gamrot's MMA grappling doesn't mean he'll be able to do the same to Moicano, because Moicano's a far better offensive wrestler, far better grappling control than Gamrot. So on the ground, give Moicano the advantage, but he may struggle to get there. Dariush isn't the easiest to take down or hold down. Dariush is also really good at using his fast jiu-jitsu style to create scrambles and work his way back up to his feet. So this is one of those matchups where it's very difficult to call. Moicano's obviously a slight favourite, but not by much. Personally, if I were capping this fight, I would have it in the even money odds range. Now, does that mean there is a bit of value in the odds on Dariush at about 2.25? I guess it does. With his implied probability being 44%. But the way I look at fights like this is just my personal view. You may disagree. Very few people make a profit betting on sports over the long term. I've done it every year for the last 15 years. So I just stick to what I know works. My personal philosophy on fights like this is I just want to stick to the low-hanging fruit where I can overwhelmingly stack the odds in my favour and make money. That's all I'm focused on. So when I know I can bet major darts tournaments every month, I can bet hundreds of football matches every week, I can live bet 12 to 14 epic UFC fights almost every weekend. For me, there is no need for me to gamble on a fight like this where I don't have a confident read either way, and I can see situations where both guys could win and I feel they're both very well matched. I'm not interested in betting on guys like Dariush where any advantages he has are marginal and they may be neutralised by Moicano's very high level MMA grappling and the fact that Dariush could be on a very steep decline because we haven't seen him or very much of him in the last 2 years. So I'm happy to pass on this one. There's no need for me to gamble on this. Plenty more fish in the sea. So many more opportunities this week on darts, football and the UFC to make a profit elsewhere. So this one's an easy pass for me. In terms of the over-under on this fight, if we take a look at the over-under, it is tricky. Personally, I lean towards this fight going the distance. I lean more towards the over on this one. If you look at Dariush's record, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Half of his fights over the last few years have kind of ended inside the distance. Half have gone to a decision. If you look at Moicano's record, to some degree, not so much. Lots more finishes. But the reason why I think this fight's more likely to go to a decision is because they're both so well-rounded that they're both good enough to kind of defend themselves on the ground. So I don't think that Moicano is going to want to stand and strike with Dariush, because I think Dariush's advantage on the feet is pretty big. I think Moicano is going to want to get this fight to the ground. Dariush's takedown offense isn't bulletproof, and with him being a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, he's probably not going to shy away from grappling with Moicano. But if this fight does go to the ground, they're both such high-level grapplers that I don't see either of them getting a finish on the ground, and that would be the scenario in which it goes to a decision. Now, if the fight does end inside the distance, I think it'll be because Moicano isn't able to get Dariush down and keep him down, so he's forced to stand and strike, and Dariush knocks him out. If Dariush doesn't win by knockout, I think this fight will go to a decision. But I don't have a strong opinion on this fight because there's so many different ways it could go, depending on what version of both these guys show up. So I'm going to stick to live betting this weekend, and live betting this fight this weekend, and hopefully we can snipe a winner live on this one. In terms of the prop bets on this fight, I guess most likely prop is going to be Moicano by decision, but don't love it. I would probably give that one a miss. You know what you could go for? You could go for something a little crazy. Let's see what the odds are like on it. There have been times in... Okay, that's a bit weird. I was going to say there have been times throughout the careers of both these guys where in different fights they've gassed bad, more so with Dariush. And so you might just want to bet on the fight to end in round 3 on the basis that it's unlikely both of them have great cardio. And in that event, quite likely the other dude finishes them in round 3 when the other starts to get tired. But I don't even know what the odds are, because fight ends in round 3 here is like 6.75, 7.0, like plus 600, which I don't like. I would want juicier odds than that. But here we've got 16.0 plus 1,500, which is the kind of odds I would want to bet something like that. So take a look at the odds, do your own research, see how you feel about that one, maybe that interests you. So now let's break down the next fight on this card, the final fight that we're going to go through in this video. It is going to be Kevin Holland versus Reinier. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people that's going to correct me on that pronunciation. I'm very sorry. We're just going to call him Captain Ridder. Alright, so this is one of the very few fights on this card in the even money odds range. We can see that Ridder is the favourite at average odds of about 1.87, which is going to be minus 115 for an implied probability of 53%. And if we take a look at the odds on Holland, he is around an average of 1.93, which is going to be minus 108 for an implied probability of 52%. So Holland is 32 years old, 6'3" with an 81-inch reach. Ridder, 34 years old, 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. So both these guys are about the same size. Holland with a bit of a reach advantage and about the same age as well. Nothing too major going on there. So, oh wow, Hill's odds have literally declined while I've been recording the video. They were 1.77 when I looked earlier on. In fact, in the breakdown, I actually think I had his odds at 1.77. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if they declined more, and they have. Anyway, okay, so back to this fight, Ridder Holland. So what I want to do before we get into talking about the specifics of this matchup. Okay, actually, I know what I'm going to do. I want to give you guys a little bit of, I don't want to call it advice, but I just want to share my philosophy on betting fights like this. Because I broke my philosophy in Holland's last fight when he fought Roman Dolidze, and it cost me money. So this time around, I'm going to listen to the philosophy that I've held for a very long time. Because generally speaking, when I go against my philosophies, I pay for it with losing bets. So, I think we can all agree this is a classic striker versus grappler matchup, where if the fight stays standing, Kevin Holland will have a huge advantage, and if the fight goes to the ground, Derrida will have a huge advantage. Like, there's no middle ground here. Classic striker versus grappler matchup. So, this week in my Discord, a lot of people have asked me what I think about this fight. And my general response has been, both of them are fucking rubbish. This fight's an absolute nightmare. Don't bother betting this one. And most people have then kind of shared their opinions on this fight and told me that they've bet one of these guys, and they've kind of explained the reasons why. But it seems very split. Some people are betting Holland, some are betting Derrida. And what's really funny is the people are betting Derrida are saying, I'm betting Derrida because Holland's trash on the ground. Derrida's just going to take him down, beat him up, blah, blah, blah. And the people betting Holland are like, I'm betting Holland because Derrida's trash. And we got two separate teams, two separate camps, Team Ridder, Team Holland. And they're both kind of betting on their guy because they think the other's worse. But what's interesting about a fight like this is, I agree with both teams. When guys that are betting Holland are saying they're betting Holland because Derrida's trash, I'm like, yeah, you know what, Derrida is trash. But then the guys that are betting Derrida, when they say they're betting Derrida because Holland's got no takedown offense, no ground game, I'm like, yeah, you're right, Holland's fucking joke on the ground. So I can see where both teams are coming from, but there is a lesson in there and something very powerful to think about. If you are in one of these teams where you're betting Derrida or you're betting Holland this weekend, think about this. People's opinions on this fight are very divided, and the odds are split down the middle, with both guys being in the even money odds range where you can shop around, bet both guys at pretty much the same odds. I've researched this fight in depth, and this is the kind of fight where I think you have to flip a coin on it. I think it could go either way. So all I would say about this fight is, if you're very confident in one of these guys, track me. If you're very confident in one of these guys, I want to try and think how to word this. If you are very confident in one of these guys, just make sure you're looking at the big picture. I'm not going to bet this fight, so I don't want to make this breakdown video super long by showing you loads of footage. It's no point, because if this were a fight where I think you should bet it, I would show you loads of footage so that you can understand this fight on a deep level, and the reasons for this and the reasons for that. I don't want to waste anyone's time doing that, because if you bet this fight, in my opinion, is no different to walking up to a roulette table and betting on the spin of the wheel to land on red or black. I think that's the level we're at when we bet this fight. Because if you tell me you're betting Derrida this weekend, I will go and show you footage against Malakin or Meerschaert where he is literally a sitting duck on the feet, where he's literally getting lit up on the feet. You know, after 5 minutes, he looks gassed out of his mind against Derrida. So if you're betting Derrida this weekend, I would show you those fights, and I would be like, explain to me why you're betting Derrida when his cardio's bad, and we know Kevin Holland's cardio is great. And when his striking defense is very bad, and we know Holland's a very dangerous striker. Explain to me the reasons why you think Derrida's a good bet. But by the same token, if someone comes to me and they say Kevin Holland's a good bet this weekend, I'm betting Kevin Holland, I'll be like, okay. And I would play them the Roman Dolidze fight. I would play them fights like Marvin Vettori, Derek Brunson. Granted, they were a long time ago, but I would play them these fights where he gets taken down easily, just lies on his back. And I would say, if you go watch Derrida's fight against Meerschaert, his takedown entries are pretty good. He looks reasonably heavy from top position, especially when you consider how weak Holland is off his back. So explain to me what you're seeing in Holland here. This is a fight where both guys have extreme weaknesses that their opponent is very well positioned to exploit. So for that reason, I think you are taking big risks if you bet this fight. Now, if you're asking me for my lean, this is a fight where, because, you know, it could go either way, I keep flip-flopping. as I'm kind of summarizing everything for you here, and I'm going back through everything over my head, my lean is Kevin Holland. And I quite often do this, right? It's one of those things where when you sit down and you research a fight, you're just kind of in your own thoughts as you go through that. But then when you come to produce a breakdown video like this, you're kind of summarizing everything you've seen. So you go back over it all in your head, you reprocess everything, and sometimes you come to a different conclusion when you start to summarize everything. So my lean now would be Holland, but I don't think I put that on the website. No, we put the Ridder, so I need to change this to Holland. So if you're a member of my community and you see my lean on this fight change from the Ridder to Holland, now you know why. And the reason why my lean would be Holland is when you weigh everything up, yes, he is trash on the ground. No takedown defense at all. And the Ridder has decent offensive wrestling, heavy top game. The reason why I go with Holland is Holland has amazing cardio, whereas the Ridder's cardio looked terrible against Meerschaert. So if the Ridder does get tired, he may not have the energy to hit takedowns on Holland. Which means even though the Ridder is a better grappler than Holland, he may not have the cardio to use the advantage on the ground for the whole fight. Perhaps he only has the cardio to cause Holland problems in the first half of the fight. Therefore, Holland could backdoor a decision or get a late finish. That's one of the reasons I like Holland. Cardio is a big deal. Second, huge striking advantage. So again, if the Ridder does get too tired, like he did against Meerschaert, starts to get a little bit sloppy on the takedown entries, Holland could catch him with a big shot and knock him out. The third reason why I like Holland in this fight, my lean would be Holland, is because he has submitted far higher level grapplers than the Ridder. So he submitted Michael Chiesa, far higher level grappler than the Ridder. Submitted Tim Means, far higher level grappler than the Ridder. And of course, Ronaldo Jacare Souza, far higher level on the ground than the Ridder. So if he's capable of submitting guys like that, he could easily hit a Hail Mary submission on the Ridder. But Holland is one of these inconsistent guys that at times, I'm not going to say looks good on the ground because that's a stretch, but at times, I don't even know what to say. What I would say is, at times Holland surprises us on the ground. Whereas I don't think the Ridder's going to surprise us on the feet. He has no chance on the feet. So maybe Holland hits something funky on the ground, hits a Hail Mary. And yeah, that would be the reason for leaning towards Holland. So in terms of the over-under on this fight, where are we? In terms of the over-under, it's tricky because both guys are so vulnerable. The Ridder's so bad defensively on the feet. Holland's so bad on the ground. I'm not sure about the over-under. I would give that a miss. In terms of most likely outcomes, I guess it's Holland by knockout or TKO, but the odds are absolutely terrible. So I would give that a miss. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please hit the like button below. Subscribe if you haven't already. The growth in this YouTube game is so slow. People generally don't like these long form videos. They just want the quick 3-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute breakdowns where, you know, someone just throws random bets out, gambles on every fight, and doesn't really put too much thought into what they do. That's what most people want. I get it, but because of that, the growth here is really slow. So help me out. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you could like the video, it would help me so much because it would boost me in the YouTube search rankings, which helps a lot. But thank you very much for watching. Check out my website, links in the description below, and hopefully Hill comes through for us. Hopefully we make another profit in live betting. Hopefully we can snipe, or we can find some more pre-fight bets for this weekend and add to a potential win on Hill. So thank you very much. Take care. Love you all, and I'll be back with another breakdown very soon. Nice one, guys. Take care. Bye.